Greetings. I'm Dr. Pearl John and welcome to the Other 167. Today we start a new series, Tough Questions and Tough Answers. And I'd like to focus on the question, when life hurts, where is God in my pain? When life hurts, where is God in my pain? Pain is one of the most universal experiences, whether it's the loss of a loved one, a devastating illness, or the shattering of dreams. Suffering feels inescapable. In these moments, many of us cry out to God asking, "Why me? Where are you in this?" And these are not new questions. Throughout the Bible, God's people have wrestled with suffering. But the Bible doesn't just offer distant theological answers. It offers a deeply personal and hope-filled response, one that can transform how we understand suffering. I'd like us to look at three key themes. The first one is suffering is not a sign of God's absence. One of the greatest lies is that suffering is the absence of God, or that He has abandoned us. This is a belief that's easy to slip into because our emotions and our circumstances and our plans can feel overwhelming as we go through that pain. But let me take you to Psalm chapter 23 and verse 4, where David, a man who knew suffering deeply and intimately, wrote, "Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me, and your rod and your staff, they comfort me." David isn't pretending the valley does not exist. He acknowledges the darkness, the pain, the fear, and the tribulation that he was going through. But his comfort comes from one powerful truth: God is with him. The valley of the death is real, but God's presence is more real. And it's not just a comforting presence, it's an active one. The rod and staff are symbols of God's protection and guidance, even in the hardest moments. When we feel like God is far, the Bible reassures us that God's presence is closest in our pain. In fact, Hebrews chapter 13 and verse 5 tells us, "I will never leave you nor forsake you." Our suffering doesn't mean that God is absent. Quite the opposite. He is walking beside us, guiding us through the storm. The pain may remain, but so does His presence. And that presence can make all the difference. The second theme I'd like us to consider is suffering has a purpose in God's greater plan. While it's natural to want to avoid suffering at all costs, the Bible shows us that God often allows pain for a greater purpose. It's not meaningless. Let's look at Romans chapter 5 verses 3 to 4, where Paul writes, "We also glory in our sufferings because we know that suffering produces perseverance, and perseverance character, and character hope." What Paul is saying here is revolutionary. Suffering isn't just something to endure. It's something that God uses to transform us. It's part of a refining process that produces perseverance, and perseverance in turn shapes our character. And a godly character leads to a hope that is unshakable. Think about it. We don't develop strength by living in comfort. Just like muscles only grow through resistance and strain, our faith grows through the struggles we face. Suffering becomes a tool that shapes us into the people God is calling us to be. Without it, we might never develop the resilience, the compassion, or the faith that we need to go through life's twists and turns. And this is something we see repeatedly through the scriptures. In the life of Joseph in Genesis chapter 50, we read about how he was being betrayed by his brothers and sold into slavery and unjustly imprisoned. Joseph eventually rises to power in Egypt. Looking back, he tells his brothers, "You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good to accomplish what is now being done." Joseph's suffering had a greater purpose. And while we may not always understand why we suffer, we can trust that God is working for our good and His glory even through the hardest of times. The third theme I'd like us to look at is God's answer to suffering is found in Jesus. At the heart of the Christian faith is the belief that God didn't just stand at a distance while we suffered. He entered into our suffering. The most powerful demonstration of this is found in Jesus. Hebrews chapter 4 and 15 reminds us, "For we do not have a high priest who is unable to empathize with our weaknesses, but we have one who has been tempted in every way just as we are, yet he did not sin." Jesus, the Son of God, experienced the fullness of human suffering. He knew hunger and thirst and exhaustion and betrayal and even death on the cross. And when we look at Jesus, we don't see a God who is immune to pain. We see a God who suffers alongside us. In fact, on the cross, Jesus cries out, my God, why have you forsaken me?" In that call, he experienced the depths of human suffering, not just physically, but spiritually. But that Jesus' life doesn't end there. Through Jesus' death and resurrection, we are given the ultimate hope that suffering and death are not the final word. Jesus overcame them, and because of him, we have the promise of a future where pain and sufferings will be no more. Revelation 21:4 paints this beautiful picture of that future. He will wipe every tear from their eyes. There will be no more death or mourning or crying or pain, for the old order of things has passed away. Jesus' suffering gives us hope that one day our pain will be wiped away. In the meantime, we can rest in the assurance that God understands our suffering and that He is with us. Suffering is a mystery, and while we may never fully understand it, we know that God has not abandoned us. He is with us in our pain. Our suffering, though hard, can serve a greater purpose in shaping us and drawing us closer to Him. And most importantly, through Jesus, God has entered into our suffering and provided a way out, offering us the hope of a future where pain will be no more. So the next time life hurts and you find yourself asking, where is God in my pain? Remember, He is right there with you, offering comfort, purpose, and hope. This is Pearl John signing off, The Other 167. Thank you for watching The Other 167. We continue the series with the next tough question. Do join. God bless.